Oh, good evening. Last week we had the pleasure of discussing what true humility is. And for those of you who weren't here, humility really is the foundation virtue in a lot of ways for there are other virtues that we'll be discussing in the coming weeks. Today starting with prudence. And humility, as I mentioned last week, serves truth. That the real humble person is humble because he knows exactly who he is. Humility, on the one hand, is not self-deprecation, but nor is it being too proud and boasting in your accomplishments. Because ultimately, everything we do is for the greater glory of God and not the greater glory of me. So humility has to become that foundation virtue, because without it, the other ones fall. And tonight, as we discuss prudence, the first of those cardinal virtues, it especially relies on humility. Humility because prudence being that virtue which seeks out good counsel. But true prudence, likewise, does not stop merely at asking for counsel. Prudence, if you were to ask the great theologian St. Thomas Aquinas, would tell you that prudence is right judgment married to action. It is not due alone to merely seek out what is good and right and just, but then to not follow up on what is good, right, or just. Likewise, prudence is not one to just dwell on the feelings of the person, which I think is such a profound issue with today. On the one hand, we like to banter around, well, who am I to judge? Who are you to judge? You are created in the image of God. Now, we can't judge in the final sense. We cannot judge who is going where when they die. That is not up to us. But prudence demands a judgment, does it not? In our day-to-day lives, when we judge what is good or what is right, we are using our judgment to make those determinations. And prudence demands a properly formed conscience to do that. I can't tell you how many times I've heard of people say, well, the church says don't do this, don't do that. You know, these are all great things that I love to do. Yet, there is a reason for that. Ultimately, it's about freedom, and we'll get to that in a later week, so no spoilers just yet. But to be able to properly form the conscience is almost an easy thing in terms of the church has given us the abilities and the methods to do that. Because a lot of that deals on precepts, does it not? For instance, there's 10 of them. They're called commandments given to us from God. These are the ways with which to properly order the mind and to act prudentially in our lives. Keep holy the Sabbath day. No other gods before me. Even all the way down to especially respect your mother and father, which my parents were very big on. And all the way down, right? We have these commandments by God to make these decisions easier for us. But that's really not the problem most of us have when it comes to prudence. We usually tend to agree with Thomas Aquinas. Yeah, right judgment, I agree. But it's the action, isn't it, that sometimes we find lacking. I know I do. I know I'm definitely not perfect. And so even though we know what it is we ought to do, that right action, actually fulfilling and pursuing what we should do, is where we tend to come up short more often than not. Thankfully, there is some hope. All these virtues hinge on something, and we know that because of the name cardinal. Cardinal comes from the Latin cardo, which means a hinge. So what is being hinged? Well, mentioned before last week that all these virtues are these ideals which are found in the middle. Right? So too little of something is not so good, but too much the other way is not so great. We're here at the church today, so I'll bring up probably an obvious example. But religion can be taken in these ways. Religion in and of itself is a good thing. Too much religion becomes almost superstition. If I don't do this, if I don't do that, God will damn me. Too little becomes too loose. Well, God's going to forgive me anyway. Why bother? But a true, proper, formed conscience understands that it is that middle ground where virtue lies. Not so much that if I don't cross myself in just the exact perfect way every time, my prayers don't count. But likewise, I don't need to pray because God knows what I want anyway. But it lies somewhere in the middle. We get to this point because all these virtues rely on habits that are formed. No one is born virtuous. If only it were that easy. Yet, through your continual habit of saying, coming to Vespers on Wednesday. Shameless plug, I know. Coming to Vespers on Wednesday, attending daily Mass, helping your fellow man, praying the rosary, or whichever devotional you feel most particularly drawn to. Those are all things which help you on the road to virtue and ultimately to holiness. All these are here to help serve you becoming a saint. It's not just the men that we see in the past, the apostles on the wall or popes from long ago. Sainthood is not just for these men and women. They're for you as well. And one of the ways we attain that is through understanding what it means to live virtuously. Prudence is right judgment married to action. By coming to Mass, by continuing to learn and study the faith, you can attain the right judgment. And by continuing with the actions, however hard they may be, you will form the habit of virtue, which is the action that puts the right judgment into place. For this holy hour, I would really welcome you as we sit and reflect and pray in front of the Lord and the Blessed Sacrament. What are those objects, those stumbling blocks, which maybe cause you to either not have the right judgment or not the right action? And to take whatever those things are, those stumbling blocks, and lay them at the feet of our Lord. Let him help you be with him forever in the next life.